Hello everyone, and today we're going to use this kit to replace all 4 brake hoses for our Nissan Frontier. And if you take a look at this kit, it looks pretty awesome because these are stainless steel lines. I think they're not only going to look good, but they're also going to last longer as well. Also, we're going to pull out this real cool kit. This is a hand pump. This does a vacuum and it does pressure, goes either direction. It's pretty cool. So this is something that we're going to use just once, just to show you how it works. And we're also going to use the bleeder bottle for a majority of this, just to keep the cost down and just show you that you can do this very easily. So you're probably wondering why I'm changing out all the brake hoses. When I was under the truck the other day, I took a look at one of the brake lines, and look at that. Right on the rear driver's side, you see a little bit of a leak right on the hose. And that's a bad sign, and we need to nip this in the bud early. So I'm going to go ahead and change out all 4 of them right now. And the first thing we're going to do, let's go ahead and disconnect our ground cable. So I'm going to take my 10mm socket and socket wrench. I'm going to go ahead and loosen up this one nut. And see if I can get it loose by hand. There we go. And it should lift right up. Beautiful. And we'll go ahead and set that aside. Now, for those of you who don't want to disconnect the negative terminal on your battery, you can always disconnect this one connector right here for your ABS control unit. That's another option as well. Next, let's go ahead and pull out our nice cool toy. And let's go ahead and start assembling everything. So I'm going to go ahead and start by using a short hose. See if I can press that right on. Very nice. Then I'm going to go ahead and take the container and go ahead and attach that as well. And if you look at the top, it'll say right there, to pump. So it tells you which direction you need to go ahead and attach everything to. There we go. Then I'm going to take an extra long hose just to give me a little leeway. And attach that right to the container. So now, when I actually start pumping it, it looks like, all right, so now we're pumping pressure. We want to go the opposite way. We want to go vacuum. So we got pressure working, which is great, but that's not what we want. So right there in the front, go ahead and take that one little nozzle and pull it forward. And now we can check it again. And there we go. Now we're pulling a vacuum. That's perfect. So now we're ready to move over to the brake fluid reservoir. Let me go ahead and remove the cap. Very nice. We'll go ahead and set that aside. And let me go ahead and bring the camera in so you can see what I see. And right at the very top of the reservoir, we have this nice screen. We're going to have to remove that just so we can get the hose in there. So we'll take that out, set it aside. So now that we have the cameras returned, let's go ahead and feed the hose right in the reservoir so we can go ahead and pump out all this old brake fluid. We basically want to remove all this old stuff because we want it circulating through the system when we change out the hoses. And this pump is pretty cool. It works pretty quickly. Now, for those of you who don't want to buy this kit, in another video, I did use the turkey baster method. So all I did was take the turkey baster and just put it in a glass and just keep emptying it out. So that is an option. So if you want to do it, you can, just to save money. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and use the pump and just continuously use this until the reservoir is pretty much empty. And every now and then, I do have to empty out that container, and I just threw it in another bottle just so I can keep pumping. Alright, so we're starting to see air bubbles. That means we got a majority of it out, and I'll go ahead and set this aside. And then I'll go ahead and grab that same screen we took out earlier, and we'll go ahead and put it back. Anytime you're filling brake fluid, you always want to put the screen back in. And of course, we'll grab our .3 brake fluid and refill this reservoir. And you want to be between the mid and the max lines. We're going to be closer to max just because we're going to be bleeding the system out. And now that we're back to full, let's go ahead and take that same cap, and we're just going to set it right on top of the reservoir. So now this is where the fun begins. Time to crawl under the truck, and I'm going to go ahead and start in the same order as the order you would bleed the brakes. So we're going to start with the rear passenger side, and then go to rear driver's side, and so on. And this is the hose we'll be working on. So I'm going to pick up the camera, that way you can follow along. And if we work our way all the way up, you can see where it connects to the brake line or brake tube. And we're going to be starting with this one flare nut right there. And the tool you're going to want to remove this with is a crow's foot wrench. Now I went ahead and bought a whole 3/8 wrench set just for convenience, and as you can see, it fits on beautifully. And attaching it to a 3/8 socket wrench does actually work. It does have a little bit of room in there, but it's not a whole bunch of room. So I went ahead and just swapped this out to a small adapter so I could take it to a 1/4" socket wrench. And let me go ahead and attach that right there. There we go. So now we have a little bit more room to maneuver for all those hard to reach places. So now let's go ahead and loosen up our flare nut so we're going to remove our brake tube. Now it's just taking me a few tries just because it's a weird angle, so bear with me. And give it probably one more turn. Yeah, it's starting to loosen up pretty good, and you can even see some brake fluid. And then I'll take my 10mm wrench just to loosen up a little bit more until I can get it done by hand. And come on, a few more turns, and you're starting to see a little bit more brake fluid. And yep, feels like we're about finger tight, so I'm going to try to do the rest by hand. Come on. Almost there. There we go. Now we can see the flare nut. And I'm just going to lift the tube up just a little bit just to get it out the way. And it is going to leak, so here's what I'm going to do. Let's go and remove the bleeder valve cap. So I'm going to take my 10mm wrench just to kind of slide it right under that cap. It helps remove it. And there we go. So I got it on the first try. I just got lucky. And I'm going to take that same cap and I'm going to go ahead and plug the brake tube. This will stop all that brake fluid from leaking. And almost got it. There we go. Fit right on there. So this will help minimize the mess we're going to make later on. Next, we're going to go ahead and remove our 2 lock plates. And I'm going to just go ahead and take a pair of pliers and see if I can just go ahead and pry these out. And these should just slide right out. Unfortunately, these are rusted on there pretty good. See if I can get there at a good angle. Give it a little wiggle. There we go. So there's one. Now let's go ahead and work our way to the second one. And I'm going to go ahead and use a flathead screwdriver and see if I can go ahead and punch it upward from below. So bear with me. I'm just going to give this a little nudge. And yeah, you saw a lot of that rust kind of fly off. And there's a little bit more. Now I'll go ahead and take a pair of pliers and we'll see about prying the rest of that off. And there we go. So that wasn't too bad. And just to show you real quick, I am using a foil pan when working on these brake hoses just to keep the brake fluid off the ground. So now let's go ahead and grab our 7/16 socket and socket wrench and let's go and remove the union bolt. Now FYI, some of my other union bolts were 12mm, so just keep that in mind. It could be either or. So now let's go ahead and loosen this up by hand. And this is going to leak brake fluid, so bear with it. Alright, so far so good, no damage. And we'll go ahead and separate the brake hose from the caliper. And always remove those copper washers. Let's see if we can get that off. Very nice. And those are disposable. We're not going to reuse that. And make sure you wipe everything off. Get brake fluid off of everything. And now we can fully go ahead and remove the hose. And I'll see about just going and getting it out of these little grooves. Alright, so this one's in there really good. Come on. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and take a flathead screwdriver and see if I can just break it loose. It's rusted in there really well. Come on. Alright, now it's starting to wiggle. There we go. A little more nudge. And come on. Come on. A little bit more. There we go. So hopefully the rest of them don't fight me like this, but that pretty much came out halfway decent. And throughout the video, I'm going to be using a fair amount of brake cleaner. This brake fluid is very corrosive to paint. Look at it. It actually took some of the coating off my torque wrench, so it's very bad for any paint, so clean it off immediately. And here's the items we just removed. Look at this locking plate. Really rusted, so I went ahead and bought extra locking plates just to be on the safe side, and I'm glad I did. And I also want to compare the new brake hoses with the old ones. So it looks like we have 2 long ones and 2 short ones in the kit. And the 2 long ones, we just want to compare the lengths to make sure they're pretty much the same. And looking at this one, it looks like the stainless steel hose is slightly longer. That's actually okay. I'd rather be too long than too short. And also, looking at the old brake hose, you can see where they put a key on there, so when it bolts to the caliper, it can't move, or it gives you an orientation it wants. So I want to go ahead and take that same keyway and go ahead and mark it on the new hose. So I'm just take a paint pen, or you can take a marker, it doesn't matter. And we're just going to put 1 mark on it, so I know where to put it back in the exact same spot. And it looks pretty good. I think I can work with that. And of course, throughout the process, always make sure your reservoir has plenty of brake fluid. So we'll continuously add some between each step just to make sure there's no air bubbles being introduced in the system. So now we can work our way back under the vehicle with our brand new brake hose, union bolt, and 2 brand new copper washers. And we're going ahead and reinstall everything. I'm going to see about starting this by hand, of course. Until it's about finger tight. There we go. Well, then we'll take our 9/16 socket and socket wrench, and we're just going to go ahead and get this snug. And make sure you have the orientation of the brake line the same as the old one, just to make it easy on you. And there we go, nice and snug. So now we'll take our torque wrench, and we're going to torque this down to 13 foot-pounds or 156 inch-pounds. And we're going to keep tying it till we hear the click. Probably one more turn. There we go, perfect. So now that we got the union bolt good and tight, let's go ahead and feed the brake hose back in the same orientation as the old one. So, yep, got the same tip, and I'm going to try to get everything back in the same way, and we don't want anything binding. We want everything to flow very nice and easy so we don't feel any crinks. And we'll start with this middle holder, see if we can get it in there. That feels pretty good. Now, same with the top holder. We just want it to sit in place for now until we get the lock plates in. And the lock plates, I'm going to use the 2 new ones, and I'm going to go ahead and just push them right in place. So give that a nice little push. Come on. And this is a little tight, which is a good thing. We don't want these moving. And give it a little slide. There we go. That actually felt really good. Snapped it right in. Yeah, that's not going anywhere. And we're going to do the same thing on the top one as well. We're going to press it all the way in until it gets a nice little click. All right, that feels pretty good. Now let's go ahead and remove that brake tube plug that we used. And you're going to have a little bit of brake fluid leak out. That's completely normal. So we're going to go ahead and tighten this up as quickly as possible. So let's go ahead and install this brake tube to the new brake hose. And of course, we're going to start with finger tightening it. All right, there we go. Then I'm going to grab my 10mm wrench, and we're going to see if we tighten this up as much as we can just by hand. And there we go, nice and snug. And it looked like it stopped leaking, so we'll go ahead and clean it up a little bit. Again, we always want to remove as much brake fluid as we can. And then we'll go ahead and grab our torque wrench and torque it down to 12 foot-pounds, or in our case, 144 inch-pounds. And probably one more turn, come on. There we go, beautiful. So now that we have the new brake hose installed, let's go ahead and loosen up the bleeder valve because we're going to go ahead and prime these lines. We just want to get some of this air out of the system. So we'll take that same 10mm crow's foot wrench and go and loosen up the bleeder valve. And we're just going to go ahead and break this loose because it's probably on there really good. Yep. And now we'll go ahead and grab our hand pump and go ahead and hook it up to the bleeder valve. That way we can get some of the air out of the system. Now I'm going to show you both methods. I'm going to show you the hand pump method as well as the bleeder bottle method. And using the hand pump is pretty easy. We'll take our 10mm wrench, loosen up the bleeder valve just a little bit more, and then we'll go ahead and start pumping all the air out of the system. You should start seeing brake fluid come through, which we are. So we're starting to see some of that brake fluid come through, but there's a lot of air still in there. Now I'm going to go ahead and tighten this up because now I'm going to show you the bleeder bottle method. And that hose was on there pretty good. So with the bleeder bottle, we're just going to use a bottle with some brake fluid at the bottom, one hose, and it's just going to come right out. It's really simple. So we're going to take that same hose, go to the bleeder valve, go ahead and press it right on, make sure it's good and tight. And then we're going to want to go ahead and elevate our bleeder bottle just to make sure the hose is above the bleeder valve. And all I'm using is a brick, just give me a little bit of extra height. And then we'll go ahead and take a 10mm wrench and go ahead and loosen up that bleeder valve. There we go. So now let's go ahead and get up and stretch and then work our way to the driver's side and start pumping the brake pedal. And as you can see, we're starting to see some of the air come right out of the lines. And we're going to do this gradually for about a few seconds just to make sure there's a solid stream of brake fluid coming right out of the caliper. And I'm going to keep doing this just for a little bit longer, so I'm going to fast forward just for a little bit, just so you can see a solid stream. And look at that, that's about what you want right there. So I'm going to go ahead and slide back under the truck and go ahead and tighten up that bleeder valve. So I'm going to take that 10mm wrench just to make it snug for now, just so I can remove that bleeder bottle. And I'm going to go ahead and pinch off the hose and try not to make too much of a mess. And then we'll go ahead and set that aside. And of course, we'll clean up everything as we go. And we'll grab our torque wrench and go ahead and torque down that bleeder valve to 69 inch-pounds. You don't need much, you just need to make it nice and snug. Very nice. And we don't want to lose anything, so let's go ahead and reinstall our bleeder valve cap just for now. Very nice. Now let's go ahead and take a look at our work just to do a quick inspection. So far, everything looks pretty good. And everything looks pretty factory. And I do like how the stainless steel lines look. They look really nice. I don't see any issues up there. So far, so good. I think we're ready to move on. And of course, since we're in between steps, let's go ahead and top off our brake fluid. This only needs a little bit. We only prime that caliper just a little bit. Very nice. And we'll set the cap right back on. So now we'll move our way to the driver's side and go ahead and do the exact same steps. So with the rear complete, let's go to the front and let's go ahead and turn the steering wheel counterclockwise, and I'll show you why. It's going to make our job a lot easier in the front. This is a pain to turn because we don't have any power steering, so just bear with me. It's going to require a little bit of brute force. So it looks like we're maxed out there. So let's go ahead and go to the passenger side front, and right there, now we have access to that brake hose without taking anything apart. So this is going to make our job pretty easy. And one of the first things we're going to do, let's go ahead and remove that bleeder valve cap. So I'll take that same 10mm wrench, just to see if we can pry it off. There we go, because we're going to use that same method as we did in the rear. We're going to go ahead and take off this flare nut that goes to the brake tube. And we're going to use that same crow's foot wrench, loosen her up. Man, that thing's on there really good. Then I'll take my 10mm regular wrench, just because it's easier to maneuver for me. And then when it's almost loose, do the rest by hand. There we go. And then we'll take that same cap and go ahead and plug up that brake tube. And try to get in there. It's a little harder while I'm holding the camera. Very nice. And now we'll go ahead and grab our same pair of pliers and remove the one lock plate. Get a little pry. Very nice. That came off pretty easy. Now let's go ahead and grab our 12mm socket and socket wrench. And let's go and remove the union bolt. Come on. Man, that thing's on there really good. I think that one was a little over tightened. Now this is going to have quite a bit of brake fluid come out, so just keep that in mind, so be prepared for that. And this brake hose is pretty short, so it's pretty easy to remove. And now we can grab our new brake hose, union bolt, and washers. And as you can see, I put two brand new washers on both ends of the brake hose, and I marked it. And we'll go ahead and start tightening it up by hand. That looks pretty good. Now I'll grab my socket and socket wrench, and we just want to make it snug. Very nice. Well, we're going to route that hose back up there just to get out of our way. And then again, we'll go ahead and torque this down to 13 foot-pounds. One more. There we go. So now we can go ahead and work our way up. I'm going to go ahead and maneuver our camera just a little bit. And I'm going to try to go ahead and fit it right inside that bracket and see about getting the brake hose routed in the correct orientation. Okay, that feels pretty good. Does not feel like it's binding. And now we can go and install that lock plate, and this just pushes right on. And do a quick look. Yep, looks pretty good to me. Now let's go ahead and remove that brake tube plug. So we'll go ahead and pry that right out. Come on. There we go. And of course we got a little bit of brake fluid leaking. That's expected. And we're going to go ahead and tighten this up and install this brake tube as fast as possible. And then we'll go grab our torque wrench and we're going to torque this down to 10 foot-pounds or 120 inch-pounds. And we'll do a quick check just to make sure everything looks good. Needs a little bit of cleaning, but I will get to that. And now we're ready to prime the lines. Let's go ahead and loosen up this bleeder valve. Man, that was on there really good. I think this one was a little over-tightened. Alright, so let's go ahead and hook up our bleeder bottle. And again, same thing as earlier. We want to make sure it's on there nice and snug. Go ahead and loosen up the bleeder valve itself. And we'll go ahead and start pumping the brake pedal just to start getting brake fluid right in those calipers. We're not going to get all the air out of the system, but we're going to get a majority of it out. And then we'll go ahead and tighten up the bleeder valve. Go ahead and remove the bleeder bottle. Trying to make too much of a mess. And then we'll go ahead and torque down the bleeder valve to 69 inch-pounds. Very nice. Go ahead and put the cap back on. And of course we want to clean up everything, make sure there's no more brake fluid on those wheels. And then we'll turn the steering wheel the other direction clockwise, and then we'll go ahead and do the driver's side brake hose. And of course, I'm sure I'm sounding like a broken record. I'm going to add more brake fluid to the reservoir. Again, we always want to make sure it's topped off. We don't want to introduce any air bubbles if we can avoid it. Now this step right here, we're going to go ahead and make sure there's no more air in the line. So we're going to bleed all 4 brake calipers. And you're going to do the same order as we started. We're going to do the rear passenger, then rear driver, then so on and so on. And you want to make sure there's no more air in the system. So you're going to do the same process. You're going to hook up your bleeder bottle, pump the brakes, and then tighten it back up. And this is the last time you're going to hear me say this. Let's go ahead and add some brake fluid to the reservoir and make sure it's topped off. And we used about 3 bottles total for this whole process. And then let's go ahead and install the cap and make sure it's nice and tight. And since we're basically done, let's go ahead and connect our ground cable. So we'll go ahead and put that right back on and tighten her up using our 10mm socket and socket wrench. And give it a few more turns. Make sure it's nice and snug. We don't want this going anywhere. Now let's go ahead and go for a test drive. I'm going to do some sudden brakes. And we're going to make sure this thing actually stops on a dime like it's supposed to. I'm not going to slam too much, but I want to make sure this thing stops appropriately. Oh yeah, it definitely feels a lot better. Let's do one more. Let's get some good speed. Well, that turned out pretty good. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe.